Welcome to Lecture 1 in Unit 2, which covers Chapter 3 of the text, Gender Roles, the Foundation for Intimacy. Again, let me remind you that this lecture material is not meant to replace your careful reading and studying of the chapter. Let me begin by explaining that gender stereotypes endure, such things as blue for boys and pink for girls. Beliefs about males and females are so deeply ingrained that they have an influence from the moment a baby is born. Unconscious gender-based assumptions affect the thinking of both men and women. In a fascinating study, the first-time parents of 15 girls and 15 boys were interviewed within 24 hours of their babies' births. Now, there were no differences between the male and female newborns in terms of height, weight, or other aspects of physical appearance. Yet the parents of girls rated their babies as softer, smaller, and more finely featured. The parents of boys saw their sons as stronger, larger, more alert, and better coordinated. In another study, mothers of 11-month-old girls underestimated their infants' crawling ability, whereas mothers of 11-month-old boys overestimated it. Gender stereotypes are based on a kernel of truth, but they tend to oversimplify and exaggerate that truth. It's kind of like the cartoonist who draws caricatures. We tend to stretch and expand the ways in which men and women differ. Now, gender stereotypes can affect us in important ways. For example, the belief that women should be nurturing or that men should be unemotional. And even though ambition and drive are valued in our society, women who exhibit these traits are viewed rather harshly sometimes. And these values put pressure on men and women to conform to gender stereotypes, and even lead to a tendency for men and women to resist work in careers dominated by a specific gender. Gender bias may lead some to limit career choices and lead people to seek occupational role congruity. We are subtly socialized to believe men and women are best suited for particular professions. Researchers have been studying gender differences in behavior for quite some time. Differences between men's and women's tendencies to cooperate appear to be extremely small, and there appear to be few, if any, gender differences in men's and women's tendencies toward conforming. Men and women do differ in numerous ways, including women's longer average lifespan and the way their brains process information. It is not true that male abilities are generally superior to those of females. On various tests of cognitive ability, for example, men outscore women on some and women outscore men on others. Women on college campuses in the United States continue to enroll and graduate at higher rates than males. And it appears universally true that men are more aggressive than women. However, we need to remember there are different kinds of aggression, and it's being discovered that women may be just as aggressive as men, but express it in different ways, such as through relational aggression. These are indirect acts, such as threatening to end a friendship, engaging in gossip, and trying to get others to dislike a targeted person. Females are more relationship-oriented than males. Males tend to value independence more than females do, while females value connectedness and intimacy more than males. However, some more recent research is challenging this notion. The new data suggests that commitment, love, and marriage are strongly desired by both men and women. Sure, some men fear commitment, but so do some women. Also, the new research shows men and women equally report that being married someday is very important to them, and that love is an important reason to get married. So it appears that both men and women crave relationships. Considering interaction quality and quantity, women appear better than males at maintaining quality interaction due to their conversational style, which involves asking more questions and using a questioning tone, which clarifies messages. Gender differences exist in nonverbal behavior, Women are more skilled at interpreting nonverbal behavior. Conflict theorists explain this as a protective measure. From an early age, women seem to use eye contact to communicate intimacy more than males do. Now, any gender differences must be kept in perspective, and even social scientists do not completely agree on how the two sexes are similar and how they differ. We need to distinguish between the terms sex, gender, gender role, and gender role orientation. Sex is biology. Gender refers to males and females as social creatures and is used to refer to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones. Gender role refers to the behavior associated with being either male or female, and gender role orientation refers to the conception of oneself as having some combination of male or female traits. Traditionally, the differences between the sexes have been well defined, and there were clear demarcations between the gender roles. I think you can see it here as you compare the two columns on this slide. Now, the text uses four distinct norms that are the basis for the male gender role. No sissy stuff, the big wheel, the sturdy oak, and give 'em hell. Women have been traditionally identified as being less direct, more dependent, and more likely to resort to emotions in influencing other people. Basically, the traits that are associated with the male or the traditional male role are called instrumental traits. Expressive traits refer to the female role. To go a little deeper here, traditional gender roles define men as strong, independent, successful, courageous, aggressive, stoic in the face of pain or painful situations, decisive, and logical. Another term for that would be agentic. Women are more gentle, nurturing, emotional, supportive, sympathetic, and dependent on men for support and protection, or communal. To some extent, these traditional male and female roles are stereotypes. But even though our ideas about gender roles have been changing, many people still react to others on the basis of those traditional roles. Just remember the study at the beginning of this lecture and how parents viewed their newborns. Few, if any, people have conformed precisely to the traditional roles. Most people have some combination of instrumental and expressive traits. An individual can be androgynous. They are aggressive, competitive, and independent, but they are also gentle and sensitive. One of the controversies surrounding gender roles is whether they reflect human nature or do gender roles reflect socialization, the way in which children are nurtured. Those who stress nature may prefer to use the term sex role, which suggests that differences are innate. Sociologists are more likely to use the term gender role because prevailing evidence shows that male-female differences reflect nurture as much as, or perhaps even somewhat more than they do nature. Sigmund Freud set forth an influential case for the biological basis of gender. His famous quote is, "Anatomy is destiny." Those who draw on research about the brain and hormones also stress innate biological differences. In the final analysis, behavior has both a biological and a social component. There's an interaction between the two. If you're interested in exploring this further, there's a great article on the nature-nurture debate by Steven Pinker, who has written several books on the topic, and you can find it under the Doc Sharing tab. Most social scientists argue that nurture is an important part of gender role behavior. Symbolic interactionists and systems theorists both stress the importance of roles in shaping human behavior. Looking at other cultures, we also find deviations from traditional roles in America. Most of the traits and behaviors identified as masculine or feminine in a society are not innate. A few tendencies may be innately linked to sex, but Social factors can virtually eliminate the effects of these tendencies. Just consider Margaret Mead's studies described in the text. And whatever innate differences exist, they are quantitative rather than qualitative, which simply means the differences tend to emerge when a specific variable is measured, and they are not always readily apparent. The impact of socialization can be demonstrated through the phenomenon of body image among men and women. Dissatisfaction based on body image illustrates how we learn various cultural ideals in the family, school, and from the media. Women tend to be more dissatisfied with their image than are men. Our earliest exposure to what it means to be masculine or feminine comes from our parents, who teach and model gender roles by the different ways they treat their male and female children. For example, children learn expectations of them because of their biological sex at an early age. Boys are encouraged in more rough and tumble play than are girls, who are treated in a more gentle manner by their parents. Schools teach equality between the sexes if they group boys and girls together and apply the same standards to both. But in practice, such equal treatment is absent. The differential treatment of males and females tends to continue, even into college. The media is also influential in shaping our notions of appropriate gender roles. Television is probably the most influential of all the media and often supports traditional conceptions of gender roles. Gender roles vary over time and among societies. Gender role orientations also change over time and may even vary over an individual's lifespan. Evidence exists that people are becoming less traditional in their attitudes about gender roles. In essence, those who reject the traditional model tend to prefer more egalitarian roles. Traditional roles are not dead, however. Both men and women show some evidence of lingering traditionalism. This lingering traditionalism is also seen in attitudes. Clearly, there's a good deal of traditionalism, even while some change is also occurring. Socially constructed roles prescribe behaviors appropriate for each gender. Traditionally, women have assumed feminine roles concerning nurturance and primary caregiving, while men have held masculine roles portraying them as agents of action with less of a focus on people's needs. According to this perspective, women are primed for intimacy, whereas men are not. The one-dimensional conception of sex role orientation represents two separate poles, masculinity and femininity. These previous conceptualizations of sex role orientation had viewed femininity and masculinity as polar opposites on a single dimension. The more masculine you are, the less feminine you are. However, social scientists agree that the two-dimensional model is more accurate. People can be high or low on both dimensions of masculinity or femininity. Sandra Bem developed the Bem sex role inventory to assess the degree to which individuals endorsed what are thought to be masculine and feminine characteristics. Bem's assessment results in four possible categories for individuals: feminine, the high endorsement of feminine qualities and the low endorsement of masculine qualities; masculine, the high endorsement of masculine qualities and the low endorsement of feminine qualities; androgynous, the high endorsement of both feminine and masculine qualities. These individuals possess high levels of both masculine and feminine traits, and Bem considered these folks as highly adaptable and healthier. And the final category is undifferentiated, low endorsement of both feminine and masculine qualities. This is the smallest category in terms of numbers of people. Feminine females and masculine males are often classified as sex types since they have highly endorsed characteristics that are thought to be typical of their gender. Gender role orientation affects how we interact with others and affects intimate relationships. As we previously mentioned, women tend to have a different conversational style than men. Gender role orientation affects such things as communication, self concepts, and mental health. Symbolic interactionists define self concept as the totality of the beliefs and attitudes you have about yourself. Research consistently indicates that both males and females who are high in masculine traits have higher self esteem than others. Self esteem is one aspect of one's self concept. Masculinity tends to be associated with such things as high self esteem, high levels of adjustment, subjective well being, and less depression and anxiety. At the same time, feminine traits are not a handicap because androgynous individuals have both the masculine and feminine traits and the same advantages as more masculine types in terms of self concept and mental health. Gender role orientation may be more important than whether one is biologically male or female in explaining differences in relating to someone intimately. This is due to the fact that we have socially prescribed roles that are considered appropriate for each gender. Every human being's degree of masculinity and femininity is a mosaic. No one is completely masculine or completely feminine in every possible way. As noted by a well-known sex researcher, Albert Kinsey, humans are not discrete creatures. The world is not to be divided into sheep and goats.